Thanks so much for joining today. I really appreciate it.
I thank you for having me. I actually appreciate it as well.
So you already know that I loathe events. I literally can't stand doing events. And it's just because companies, any company I've been at, like people just don't know how to maximize effectiveness, and the event's over and people want to know the results and nobody can point to any results. So like, you're the only person I've ever heard really talk about this in a structured way. So help us understand live, in-person, virtual, hybrid, whatever. What should companies be doing better? What are they getting wrong about? Let's start with, how do they even select if they should even be going to that event?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's a great point, and a lot of points people have made similarly to this about how to get the most out of it. Should we even be doing them anymore? If you add in the fact that we're coming out of a global pandemic, fingers crossed, but that's added an additional complication. So whether we're talking pre-pandemic, height of the pandemic, and now as we're transitioning out, I think the main thing for people to realize is there's the idealistic way that you want to execute and do events, and then you've got what's in reality. Now, ideally, you want to have a forward plan, know every event, when it's happening, what salespeople you're sending, who's going to be speaking, what the topics are, etc., etc. In an ideal world, obviously that works perfectly because you've got your entire year mapped out. As you know, being an ex-CMO yourself, it doesn't work that way in reality, because halfway through the year, your company has a completely different direction, or you're going through a rebrand, or there's churn in your sales department, whatever it is, right? But most of it actually falls down in terms of the planning. Like you mentioned, selecting. Most marketers, B2B marketers that I speak with, they are at the mercy of being sold to constantly about what events they should be going. And it literally is as easy as a cold call, catching them on the right day that says, all of your key accounts or all of your clients are speaking or on the advisory board for my event, you should be there. Or the age old, your competitors are here, so you should be there. Then we're in reaction mode. Right, we need to be there. Or they target the sales guys come to the marketing team.
Right.
Oh, we're going to miss this opportunity. If we don't do it, we have to do it. And we don't get the opportunity to just sit back and actually look at it objectively, right? So the selection certainly is the main part. Having the opportunity and time to kind of look at your goals as a business for the year, look at the opportunity in front of you, which is the event or activity, and then making a more informed decision as to, is this going to meet my actual objectives? A lot of our either clients or people that I've spoken to in the industry, having run events myself, they typically do the same events year on year. We've done this event for the last 5 years. It's brilliant for us. Great.
Have to do it. Yep.
Have to do it. It looks bad if we're not there. All of those kind of stuff. That's usually, and when you get into that repetitive cycle, you fall out of love with it. It doesn't has a bad year 1 year, or your sales, you've got a new sales team, they don't like it. But the reality is, I always say to the same marketers, I'm yet to go to a sales kickoff or a company kickoff where the CEO walks up on stage and goes, "Hi guys, we're going to do exactly what we did last year. Thank you, goodbye," and walk off.
Love it.
I've never been to a kickoff like that. However, most marketing plans don't change. You do the same events year on year when events are your main route into, obviously, to market, but your business goals have changed. What you want to do this year is different from last year or different from your journey the year before. So why hasn't your marketing plan evolved also? So like I say, when someone says I hate events, we just need, that's a fair point, because they can be a bit tedious, and having run them and been to many of them, I get it. But it is such an important part. You cannot replace the face-to-face element of,
for sure,
essentially doing a deal over a handshake or whatever way you want to put it. But I would say planning is definitely the first step.
And the cool thing is, Jean, that planning and the selecting events is definitely your wheelhouse. And I, have referred you so many times for that. One of the things I want to now turn to as well is the thing that really gets me is the preparing for the event, the executing during the event. Then if you do those things right, the post-event kind of wrap up should be fairly easy. But what do companies get wrong? What do you see them missing time and time again in how they prep for an event and then execute during the event?
I think that to try and put it down to maybe a few things or one main thing, I probably put it down to resource. I think resource, The reality of it is you have a marketer or a marketing team, let's just say an EMEA-wide marketing team. And typically Middle East and Africa is lumped to sort of as one region, and one marketer would manage that region. There are loads of countries in that, and there are loads of nuances around those markets that one marketer doesn't have the time to really look into, to prep, to make sure that their spend presents ROI. But the problem is also is that marketer probably has less budget than somebody in a DAC region or in UK and I, for example. So I would say resource, having the ability to, as I talked about a minute ago, in an ideal world, fully vet an activity before you've gone there. Let's compare it to what else is happening in this quarter against our goals. You know, if our competitors are there, why are they there? Do they actually have a marketing strategy, or are they just doing everything? Do you really want to follow that strategy? Once you've prepped and vetted, you know, clients, etc., the next part is obviously identifying who's going to be there from your team, but also from the audience. Because then in an ideal world, you want your sales team doing prep a few weeks out from the event, looking at the delegate list. You'll typically get that 2 to 3 weeks before, comparing that to maybe LinkedIn, sending out a few personalized messages. Hey, I'm going to be at this event next week. Be great to have a coffee. So nothing salesy, just a nice like touch point. But typically most sales teams find out a few days before the event that they're going. So they turn up on Monday or Tuesday, having been told 48 hours before that they're actually going to an event. They've done no prep. They're not invested in it, right? That's when you see them at the stand playing Candy Crush, not doing anything, not networking, or expecting everybody to come to their stand, etc.
Right.
Which then leads me to the next point. So we've now done the prep beforehand in terms of vetting, identifying, prep with your sales team and who's going to be there. Then the on-site execution is the next thing. A lot of people say stands and booths don't work. They don't work depending on how you use them. If you have an activation on the stand with loads of lovely giveaways, people are going to come for that. If you have nothing, people think you're boring, they're going to come to you. How do you strike that balance? And that's the problem people have had with virtual in the last 18 months. Virtual stands haven't really worked, or virtual exhibition areas haven't worked. They don't get any traffic. No one really understands it. Without naming them, there are probably 3 or 4 platforms that I went on where I was just lost. I was like, I've come out of a speaking session. I wanted to have a browse around the exhibition to see what it was like. And then I couldn't actually find when the next session was, right? So you have those problems as well. So the next part is going to be having a clear plan on what your guys are doing on site. Are they going to be networking outside of people coming to their booth? Is it just a brand play because you just need to be there? And if you are looking for actual leads or MQLs, what are you doing as a part of that? I'm looking for MQLs. I've got no speaking slot, no call to action, no activation at my stand. I've just got a table, 2 chairs and a roller banner. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not, it doesn't, the package that you've gone for doesn't match what you want out of it. And then lastly, which you touched on, if you've done the first few things correctly, the follow-up should be pretty straightforward. But where that falls down is, again, a little bit down to resource, where a lot of the time your CRM system isn't effective. What can be accepted as a lead, or your marketing team relying on the sales guys uploading onto the CRM so they can, you know, monitor what, you know, ROI is going to be coming from what lead or how many leads they've generated. And a lot of the time that falls down. And then to cover it all, but right back to the first point about resource, is typically you finish one event and then you're on to the next one. You don't really have the time to go in behind that event and go, this is the contract that we signed. These are the deliverables we expected. Did we get those deliverables? Now, if the event's gone well, why has it gone well? Was it down to us, or organizer, or just the event? Same way if it doesn't go as expected. You know, we sent our speaker in 4 days before the event, and even a day before the event, there was no session title. And then they say, oh, we only had 7 people in our session. That could be why, but it also could be because of the event. So there's an ideal way to do it, but what we've got to deal with is the reality, which is a lot of companies don't have, a lot of marketing teams don't have enough resource to execute, but they still have the targets attributed as if they do.
100%, 100%. And that is huge. And for me, I don't know if I'm exaggerating here, but maybe it's just PTSD, but it feels to me like the biggest conversations around events is who's going to be manning the booth at what time, and not all this other stuff you talked about. So just kind of to wrap up, Jean, because you work with so many different teams around the world and some pretty big global organizations. What are some realistic expectations, some realistic ROI we should be getting out of events if we're doing them properly? So more relationships, deeper relationships. I mean, kind of like, what are your top 3 that we should be getting out of events?
I think the reality of it is looking at your event strategy as it's not a one and done. You're not going to do an event in March, speak to that lead or opportunity in March, and necessarily close that within 6 to 18 months, depending on the software or tech that you sell, right? Look, just like when we make any big purchases personally, you usually need multiple touch points, multiple engagements. So what I would always say is, and again, we're kind of going into the realm of ideal, in the ideal scenario, ideal world, but you've got to remember, I don't know if it's changed this year or since the pandemic, but on average, people will attend 2 events a year. You want to have the opportunity to meet that prospect and or company at multiple events. So if you met them in February, try and meet them again in September, if there's somewhere else that they're going. Being consistent in terms of what you're doing in your engagement with them will help in terms of getting the most out of it. And I say that because we had a recent scenario where we've had a client ask for advice when they're looking to pump a lot of money into one event that's performed really well for them in the last 18 months. And my rebuttal was, well, you could spend more, but you already meet these people here. They're also going to other things. They're other getting their information in other ways. So outside of events, what other things can you be doing? What are you doing with your social media strategy? What are you doing with, getting more content out there, thought leadership, engaging their mind, getting them to think, like you, or asking them, we're trying to sell you something, but ultimately you do this every day. You tell us what your pain points are. These are the suite of solutions that we have that can help you, and have actual engaging conversations outside of, we've met you one time at a booth, at an event, and 6 months later, we're wondering why it's not converted from the pipeline. And that is probably something that's consistent globally. It doesn't matter whether we're in North America, right, DAC, whatever, that's across the board. But again, for anyone listening, and for most people that have obviously worked in the industry, whether it be the event side or the marketing side, it's all great saying these things idealistically, but when you've got to work with tight budgets, limited resources in terms of headcount, plus high demands, it's really hard to have all of those things in mind, if that makes sense. But slow down to speed up. Just try to, if you really want to get ROI from events, literally treat the event as part of the campaign. If I'm doing this one event, even if I'm only doing one a year, why am I doing that one event? And what am I doing for the 3 or 4 months before, 3 or 4 months afterwards, that's going to support my engagement at that event?
Love it.
Yeah. Things like content, just very quickly on that as well. That's another big thing, content. If you've got content that you believe is relevant for the market, you want to be getting that out before the event and use the event as a touch point of how many people have seen it or engaged with it or whatever, rather than new bit of content. It's really easy to I want to present this at the event and be the first time people have heard of it, but you've kind of not built up that excitement to want to meet you, if that makes sense. You've not taken them on a journey, essentially. So if you want ROI from doing events, it needs to be part of a campaign. You need to tell a journey, keep these guys engaged, and in an ideal world, I could say, have the right resources in place to execute.
Well, and it's just so much more strategic than, oh my God, we have to be at this event. What does the booth look like? Who's manning the booth? Where are the leads? So
exactly that. And you spend so much more time looking at that. I mean, before, and this is not a criticism in any way, shape, or form, but you will tend to find that if you think about marketers and the way that how creative they are and what's exciting about being a marketer, and you want to elevate the brand, or you want to build a brand in a new market, or you want to position your business, when you think of, like right now, if I said I wanted a burger, the first thing I think of is McDonald's. It is. I don't think of I don't even eat McDonald's, but if I want a burger, McDonald's just pops into my mind. Effective kind of marketing. So marketers, that's what you get excited about and doing with your brand and for your business. But what you tend to find the day-to-day life of a marketer is more of being down in the weeds, but you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
hotel? Have we ordered the right plane tickets? Oh my God, and I need to sort out because my CEO wants to come. Oh my God, what am I going to do because the booth size is incorrect? And what's the shipping address? And you're doing all of that tactical stuff, which yes, we need to get right in order to execute. Right. But where's the strategic oversight overall? Like you just
and that's where the resource piece, I think, is critical, is we don't have enough strategic thinking, resource, and collaboration on events. So this is why I've always loved your message. So Jean, thank you so much for joining me and talking about this. I want to get this out there. It's a real pleasure, as always.
My pleasure was all mine, Maureen. It's lovely speaking to you as always.